So
Yeah,
first off, I really would love to introduce you and how this came about.
sure.
Chef Tarrance, Brennan here from Michelin Restaurant. Unbelievable that I get to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
I have to tell the listeners how this came about, okay? So, because really, I was just going to talk to you basically on chefs, Michelin star chefs. How do you become a master chef and that kind of stuff?
Right. Right.
And I was going to just have a phone conversation, and then you were like kind enough to just say, "Oh, let's do this live on Substack." So
Yeah, well, I done it. You started asking us questions, and I started to type in. It's like, you know what? I'm about efficiency, so I was like, this is going to be go back and forth way too long. Let's hop on the phone, and then from there, I turn on. Why don't we just do it live on Substack for our subscribers? So yeah.
yeah, well, thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
So I think the key for listeners of like my group, anyways, we're more health oriented and everything, but
Yeah.
we always talk food, we always talk flavor, we always talk how we can transform, the healthy cuisine into home cooking. And this is such a big problem, right? So I thought it was really actually a great segue to actually find out how do you become a Michelin star chef? What's your journey there? One thing
Lot.
for the
Yeah.
listeners, for my listeners, maybe
Sure.
briefly, because they may not be engaged with what it means to be a Michelin star chef, right? So
Right.
this is the hardest thing you can do in the culinary realm, right? So it's like this. Everybody knows in America, for example, James Beard Foundation and so on.
Yeah.
But we have the rating of Michelin star, and that's an international rating, Tokyo, Paris, all over the world. And there's one standard, and it's very, very, very hard to get one star,
Right.
let alone 2 stars that you achieved. So
Right. Right.
very,
Well, Michelin, some of you may know, some of you may not know. For a chef or a restaurateur, that's the epitome of any rating. No, no, you can go Gomeo or New York Times, Food and Wine magazine. I was like best new chef. All that. The Michelin star for a chef is the height of recognition. So it also back when I was a cook. The Michelin was only available in Europe, in France and Italy and Switzerland, and they came over to the States, I think in early 2000, I think. But you only had Michelin star restaurants in Europe, years ago, and they came over to the United States, whatever year that was. Well, yeah, let me see what I got mine. I don't have the date on. Anyway, 2010. But the Michelin is, like anything, it has its naysayers or whatnot, but it really is a very standardized. They have a very for example, New York Times is one food critic. Well, now they changed that recently too. Now it's a couple critics, but usually it's just one critic. It's one person's opinion. For example, back when I had my restaurants, a food reviewer from the Times would come in. They come 3 or 4 visits. They give you a rating, and that's it for 10 years. That one time, and usually it's when you first open up a restaurant. As you probably know, it takes months and months and months to for a restaurant to get its footing and to get into going on all 8 cylinders. So the reviewers tend to come in too early, which we're serving the public, so they're able to do that, and that's okay. But it takes a little while to get your footing and to get into the groove and to really perform at a very high level. So anyway, what's great about the Michelin Guide is, number one, is it's not just one person. Say we don't know exactly, but say there's 5 reviewers in New York City, and they all come to Michelin restaurant, and it's a consensus. It's not one person saying this is 3 stars, this is 2. It has to be a consensus. So number one, you have 5 different opinions. It's more collaborative, which is always better. And it is, as you mentioned, it's very difficult and you don't know who they are. Typically, we know what the New York Times looks like, especially now. This all changed in the last year or so. Now they allow their photos to be out there in the world. But years ago, critics would disguise themselves and use alias names, and it was a big game for restaurateurs to like get the photos and get the phone numbers and cross check and see, because it was that important to get a great review. With with Michelin, we don't. They're very good at being discreet. I mean, some may say that, oh, it's only one diner, two diners, but we don't know. But you don't know who they are whatsoever. So that's great because it's when we know our food critics come in, you can put more focus on it. You can do things a little bit different. I mean, your base cuisine is still going to be the same, your stocks and sauces, but you can do little things to make the experience more refined for the reviewer. However, with Michelin, you don't know who they are. So I like that because it merely means you're being judged on what you do day in and day out to every customer. And another thing that's very good about the Michelin Guide, it comes out every year. So every year you have a chance to gain a star or lose a star or stay the same. So every year you get criticized. And I love that because, you have the opportunity again, like I said, to either, improve yourself, stay the same, or on the, the lesser side of that is to lose a star, which you don't want to do. But Michelin is the most rigorous, the hardest, uh, the hardest ratings to achieve in the restaurant world.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, right? So this is,
Yeah.
we finally got a Michelin star chef here in Aspen. That was 4 years ago, just when I left. It's the first time they came to Aspen, actually. Before that, there
Okay.
was never Michelin star rating. Plenty great restaurants there, by the way, but
Yeah.
they never came until like just 4 years ago, right after COVID came. So.
Right. They're rolling out in the cities. Every year they add a couple other cities, but now they're in quite a few cities in the United States, which is great.
So what was your journey there? I think what listeners would like to see is or hear sort of maybe the difference that like our generation back then, we grew up with a whole different level of you had to earn your recipes, right? I mean, you
Right.
didn't just go on the internet and look them up, right? You had to work hard in kitchens to get to earn a recipe, right? So
Right.
what guide us maybe through that
Right.
concept of how you achieved where you
So,
started?
yeah. So imagine a world with no internet. That's the way it was back when we were training, right? Imagine that. So everything we learned, we either had to get out of a physical book or go to a place to learn or travel to a place to learn. So in America, I'm American. We have no formal apprenticeship program like in Europe, which for me is the best way to learn because cooking is a craft, right? It's not. It's like carpentry or bricklaying. I don't want to that doesn't sound so romantic, but it's a craft. It's you work with your hands and then there's, maybe 20-15% inspiration and art, but mostly it's a craft. It's repetitive and you gotta do it and learn it. So in the United States, we have culinary schools that are very good, but you may do a hollandaise one time or cut a vegetable one way or do a dish and then you move on to the next thing in your studies. Well, that's fine. However, again, getting back to the cooking as a craft, it needs to. It's about repetition, about mastering something. So we did not have, as I said, we don't have a apprenticeship program. So I developed my own like self-imposed apprenticeship. So wherever I worked, and I did not go to culinary. I almost went to culinary, but I didn't. I ended up just staying in kitchens and working. And every place I worked, I would work every station, and if I felt I needed, say I didn't work in the pastry department because I'm a cook, I would go work in the morning at a pastry shop for a couple years to master pastry, and then go to work at night. So it's called a stage, or I used second job. So my training, um, I, I kind of directed. Like if I was missing something, I'd make sure I'd go experience it and learn it and master it. Um, one of the one of the great things about I worked at Le Cirque is that back in the day in New York, whenever a great chef came to New York or a restaurateur, they always came to Le Cirque restaurant. It was renowned and famous. It was a French restaurant, highly regarded. And they always ate there. Sergio Macchione was the owner, so they had this relationship. So I worked there for 2 years as saucier and sous chef. And then I wanted to go to Europe because that's where the three Michelin star restaurants were and two Michelin star restaurants were. And they weren't in America yet. So I wanted that experience to work in the best restaurants in the world. So I had written a bunch of letters from the chef from the Cirque, and I was able to arrange 6 Michelin 3-star restaurants to work in there for in various spots for 3 months or 6 months. Some I got paid, some I was free, some I got room and board. But I stayed in Europe for 2 years, in Italy and France and La Gavroche in London, and what I call finishing school. So I I physically worked in all the stations in restaurants, and then I worked in a butcher shop to learn butchery because I did not have formal training, and then went to Europe to see what the best in the world do and how they operate and run their restaurants. So that's kind of my background. Just real quick, I grew up in the restaurant business. My parents had a restaurant when I was 12, 13, 14. It was just, submarine shop, whatever, a pizza shop. But it was there that I first got my exposure to the kitchen per se. It wasn't about the food. It was about just a happy place. My dad was always singing and whistling, and we had a market out front of the restaurant. So that's where I first kind of started to develop my interest in kitchens and cooking. And then through high school, after I was finished with sports and at the 10th grade, I worked in kitchens and restaurants. And I knew when I was a sophomore in high school, I wanted to be a chef. So I kind of like zeroed in on that, and I didn't take the college prep school because I knew I was going to be a chef in culinary school. So I goofed off in high school and just focused
That's
on
true.
cooking. Yeah.
Now, who was the chef at Le Cirque when you were there? Because I know
Alan Sayak.
like say,
Chef Alan Sayak. Yeah. He was there
yeah.
a long time. He was before Daniel Boulou.
Okay, well, because when he took over, that really took off again, or it
That's
was
right. That's right. Well, I'll give you an example. When I was working at Le Cirque, Chef Sayak is classically trained, very frugal, old, just an old classic chef. Like trained and every penny. He just was very frugal, and with payroll and everything. So we had 18 people in the kitchen at the time. We had 3 New York Times stars, and it was a busy restaurant for that type of restaurant. It was 200 every single night. We were in the weeds. It didn't matter if it was Monday or Saturday. Every night it was packed, busy.
yeah.
It was a 3-man hotline, 4-man sometimes when the sous chef came up kicking and screaming because he had to come work the line. We got in the weeds. So we had 18 people in the kitchen, one sous chef. The saucier was really the sous chef too in the morning, but it wasn't officially the sous chef. And when Danielle took over, and this is taking nothing away from Danielle, he worked smarter, not harder. The brigade went up to 36 people in the
Oh,
kitchen. So
oh, I didn't know that.
I just wanted to put it in context because when I was there, we worked so hard. And not to say in Danielle's kitchen he didn't either, but they ended up getting 4 stars to his credit. But they had a big team to pull that off. So that's kind of a
Wow,
little history of the Cirque. And they had 4 stars, and Danielle, of course, went on to be one of the great chefs in the world.
absolutely, yeah. That's so. Did you get to work with him as well, or were you going
No,
already
we've
to
done a lot
point?
of events together. I know him; he's a friend of mine, but I never worked under him.
Yeah,
We worked in a
yeah.
lot of same places. We worked there with Roger Verger and Moulin de Mijan. He worked there. I was the executive chef of the the Polo Club at the Westbury Hotel. He was a sous chef there, but I came after that as the chef. Where else? We worked together. We worked at Le Cirque. So there's some overlap in places that we worked, but we didn't work together.
So tell me about Roger Verchet, because he's one of my really ultimate heroes. He's right up there with Paul Bocuse, and he's like the
Yeah,
stratosphere of chefs. I got to know him one time briefly, but
yeah.
yeah, why? How did you get in there first of all? I mean, who did you have to pay off to get in there?
Well, getting back to Le Cirque, right? When he came to New York, he came to Le Cirque, so there was that connection. So
Okay,
even before I did my 2-year um, a
apprentice.
2-year apprenticeship in
That
Europe, on vacation, Le Cirque would close for 1 month in August, and again during that time, I would go to restaurants too to go work. And I went to Verger one of those times, and I worked there, and that's where I met him, and that's where I really fell in love. I mean, he's known for he called the cuisine of the sun. Moulin de Mijan was the restaurant, and it was in the south of France, in Mougins, right outside of Nice. So all those flavors is where I spent a lot of time in the south of France, and I just love all olive oil, garlic, pepper. The
yeah.
Mediterranean
So I'm
cuisine
saying,
is
I have to ask So in San Francisco, when I worked there one time, I was helping out. This was for the French embassy. And I worked for Wolfgang Puck, so I was working with the post trio team, right? So any Chingrats, I'm not sure if you know them, but anyhow, so Roger Verchet was there, and he was cooking his little zucchini, little baby zucchini, and the blossom stuffed with
stuffed. Yeah, stuffed.
a
Yeah,
whole dropper and the excel
yes,
around it and cut in half. And so
yeah.
anyhow, so back then it was super fast, right? So I was like the fastest guy in the kitchen back then because I was working with 2 hands and he recognized that because he fell a little bit behind in presentation. So when he saw me work that hard, he came to me with a plate of his zucchini truffle. I almost died, and Roger Rocher himself handed me a
Yeah.
plate of truffle, and I was like, oh my God, I'll
Yeah,
never forget
he
it,
was
right?
a real gentleman too. Very happy, always big smile. He had a contagious smile, and he was one of the chefs that incorporated other flavors from around the world. Because back in the 80s, French cuisine, they were very rigid with what they did. There's Nouvelle cuisine coming out, and then he incorporated a lot of different because he
But
traveled
he
a
didn't
lot.
do that in his restaurant, that dish, when you were there. Do you remember that? That he served like a whole nugget of truffle right there
Yeah,
in the zucchini stuff? Yeah.
yeah, his
It's
stuff in
so
his
good.
zucchini, his stuffed Provençal vegetables, artichoke barragoule. He was very well known for.
And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, when we talked about it briefly, this is where people live the longest, right in that neck of the woods down in Monaco. People always talk Mediterranean food, and I'm like, well, that's exactly the region where people live. 89 years in Monaco is, yeah, I mean, everybody can look at this, World Health Organization and so on, right? But that style of cuisine is actually, that would be the real Mediterranean food, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, you cook healthy, and I do most of the time. I mentioned briefly to you, I mean, I say study lightly, but I've studied longevity, and my goal is to live to be a healthy 100.
Good.
And when you look at different diets, what's the one? Oh gosh, I have the book right here. What is it? The Blue Zone diets and all the fads and keto and all that stuff. I mean, I played around with them all, but it always goes back for me anyway to the Mediterranean diet, which I think is the healthiest and most sustainable and most enjoyable. And I really don't call it a diet; it's more of a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
But all those flavors, olive oil and the seafood and the vegetables, because I cook mostly, I'm seafood plant-based forward. I don't eat a lot of meat these days. If I do, it's going
Yeah.
to be grass-fed.
Okay.
But I'm mostly I'm mostly pescatarian, I guess. But I eat
That's good.
a lot of vegetables.
So you really dig into that Mediterranean, which was a culinary upbringing in a large part. That's really your.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. My first restaurant, Michelin, was a Mediterranean restaurant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. So I read a lot about it. But before we go there, you just celebrated with Jacques Pepin, one of my other great heroes, the 90th birthday.
Yeah.
The French paradox, right? So here is a classic French chef. Everybody thinks, oh, they only eat butter and cream and pile it on and so on. Jacques Pepin is 90 years old, right? So I think that's
Yes.
really says something
And
about,
he drinks wine every day.
and he
Right?
drinks
I
wine
mean,
every.
I don't know what your feelings are about wine. Everyone, it's been getting, I mean, now you can't even have like 1 ounce of wine is terrible for you. Before,
It,
the
yeah,
French paradox back in the 60s or 70s um, when 60 Minutes did a story about French longevity and French, and they mentioned how red wine was healthy for you, 2, 3 glasses a day, etc. And that was been great for such a long time. Now it's like, oh my God, you can't even enjoy a glass of wine. So how do you feel about that, Martin, being
so that,
in the health space?
well, okay, so for me, it's a quantity, right? So I never really look at one glass or two glasses because, for example, the socializing benefit that you would have by going
That's right.
out, right? So
Yeah.
if you're locking yourself in and like, oh, I cannot have any wine, cannot do anything, I cannot, that's not a life, right? So the socializing aspect you get by sitting and joining a family table, have a glass of wine, and don't have it every day and don't have 3 glasses or, so those are two different things, right? So if
Right.
my history has been, I worked with master sommeliers, right? So I had all the top wines as well, or the expensive wines. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Because Jake Fletcher would always serve it to me. So anyhow, but then I was abusing that when I was younger. When I was 30 years old, you work hard, you drink way too much and all that kind of stuff. So in my case, in my personal case, I got to correct that. Okay, so I have abused it way too long. I got a sort of, you have the girl from Burgundy come in at night, and you have your friend Scott show up later on. It's,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a problem. So I think it's really close dependent, right? So look at your life, right? You're 60 years old, you're 50 years old, and you just go back and you say, well, okay, I had 10 years that I've used badly. Maybe I need to watch more, right?
Right.
And that's my
Yeah.
only recommendation, right? So if you drank like the French do responsibly, right?
Right.
Well, you can have those results, right? So if you drink like the people that in Monaco, right, you get to live 89 years. That's how long they live there. They all
Yeah.
drink wine, they all enjoy
Right.
it,
Right.
but smaller quantities. They
Right.
they also have cheese, but they have small quantities. It's not like in America where you pile it high, right?
Right.
You just
Yeah. I mean,
enjoy
yeah,
it.
their portions are smaller across the board, really, and they eat a lot of seafood, and when they eat meat occasionally. But if you look at some of the blue zones in the Mediterranean, they all drink most of them drink wine, right? A glass or two of wine a day, 2 glasses of wine a day.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
So there's so many factors going with that, right? And I'm not really stuck on any one principle because I get to meet so many professors now, so many doctors. Everybody sort of says the same thing. It's all individual, right? Look at your life history, look at the stress factors, look how much you sleep, look at
right,
for us chefs, it's really bad because we never sleep. We
right.
stress all the time.
Well, back
We,
back in the day, it was like, oh, I only need 3 hours sleep. Rah rah rah. 4 hours sleep. I can work 16 hours a day. I still sometimes work 16 hours a day, but I, I don't know how many pillars you think are health, but it's your diet. It's sleep. Now I'm focused on sleep big time, which I never did. I used because I love the mornings and I get up early. I go to bed early and I get up real early at 4, 5 o'clock, and I have like 3 hours to myself to do my morning routine, and that time to me is very special. So I like getting up, but when I get up, I would only sleep 4 or 5 hours, and I just start my day because I wanted to get going. Now I have the Oura ring, and I really try to go back to sleep because now what I've learned is 7 hours, which I've never hardly ever got 7 hours. Forget 8. So now I'm trying to push 7 hours every day, but sleep and then you talk about socializing, good sleep habits, 8 hours a day, and then of course the diet and alcohol, and then and exercise. Right, those 4 or 5 things are what's what I call the pillars of a healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely right. And it's just as much enjoying your company and life and everything else. I think
Yeah,
that's always something we always that
right,
in the wellness sector gets forgotten too often, right? So we always talk just sleep, just stress, and just
right,
eat right and just exercise. These four are the
right,
pillars, right? But
right.
I think we forget that socializing, sitting down at the
Absolutely.
family table, and what you bring to the table actually is so key to it.
Yeah,
So along that line, we spoke earlier to pivot maybe just a little bit back to uh, how, because many of you certainly would want to be interested of how you develop recipes, right? So for
yeah,
that kind of level of cooking, I think we have to distinguish a little bit these days when you look at Michelin star that per se or these fancy restaurants, it's
yeah,
tweezers and other kind of stuff, right? But we cooked like as a craft, right? We had like our hands in there and we were like, like creating wholesome dishes that actually matched in flavor and texture. And, it's like some really great experience. What's your take on creating great flavors as a Michelin star?
in a Michelin restaurant or at home.
In a,
It's
In a Michelin, and then we go into home,
Yeah,
maybe.
and it's basically the same, right? It's just a different style of presentation. So first and foremost, it's all about the ingredients, right? It's about high quality ingredients, no matter you're cooking at home or in a Michelin-starred restaurant. I mean, that's a given. So in a Michelin restaurant, we have the resources to get the best ingredients in the world, and more so, home cooks are able to get the best ingredients in the world too, through whether it's through the internet or local farmers markets, right? And for me, it all starts at the farmers market. It all starts with vegetables. That's how I start my menu process. I mean, because listen, you got pork, meat, fish, beef. You have your proteins, and then they're always going to be whether sirloin or filet. It's beef. What do you do with
Yeah.
that beef? Well, where the creativity or the ideation comes from is the market, the season. I cook very seasonally, so I often get asked, "What's your favorite season?" And I always it's like my favorite season is the season I'm in now, right? But I could easily say like spring is here, right? So I get excited. Spring is, spring. Oh God, I haven't worked with asparagus all year. I haven't worked
Okay.
with peas all year.
Chef, sorry, I will have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I'll have to interrupt you because I read up on your famous chestnut tagliatelle, right?
Oh yeah.
So I was like, oh man, we have to talk about that, right? How did we come up with a chestnut pasta, right? So I think
Well,
that might be your favorite. I don't know. I
well,
don't
I'll
know.
show
I
you
really,
how. So what I do, say it's you draw a circle on a plate, right? So
yeah.
I was known for wild game back in
Okay.
Michelin. I love one of my. I mean, I love every wild game. I developed a huge affinity to. Back when I had Michelin, I could get real wild game from Europe. In America, I don't know if anyone knows this. It's all farm raised. You cannot get wild game legally. Purchase it for a
So,
restaurant.
so for a reference point, so if, for example, in Colorado, you get the lamb, right? And it has the eyes like
Right.
this big for the way.
Right.
And it tastes like beef. It's on corn for 60 days or so.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really big. It's very mild, but it doesn't taste like lamb at all.
Right. Right.
So
So
that's sort of like,
I never understand people say, yeah, venison is, oh, but it's too gamey. That's, what do you mean? That's the point. It's a game. So I did all the Scottish game, wood pigeon, woodcock, pheasant, hare, all on my menus every year. So then from there, so you have the wild game. I add a dark meat, and then you have lighter meat like ray leg, partridge, and pheasant, where I garnish things differently. Think about lighter sauces versus heavier sauces for the dark red meat, gamey stuff. So getting back to the chestnuts, whether it's spazzola, spazzola, or tagliatelle or pasta or polenta, is chestnuts go good with game. So instead of just doing a chestnut puree, a classic chestnut puree, maybe with a little zest of orange or vanilla, I said, what can I do different? Maybe sometimes I Americanize things a little bit, or I draw off all my experience. Or I don't say my cuisine is global, but spazzola is from your part of the world. So chestnuts and that'll be the starch component. Not to say I do starch and vegetable every dish, no, but that's how I came up with that because I cooked a lot of game, and chestnuts go very well with game. They complement it. So from there, so say I have a grouse, dark red meat, very gamey. So I start, oh, chestnut. Then, hey, what goes with chestnut? Oh, chocolate and chestnuts go together. So maybe I'll finish a sauce with chestnut. What goes with chocolate? Oh, zest of orange. Or and so how I create dishes is I start with something, and as you go like a pinwheel, as you go further out, you have common ingredients like chocolate and orange and bacon and whatever. And then as you further go out, that's where it gets interesting because you're teaming up ingredients to the last one you wrote. And then it eventually does most of the time work with the main ingredient. So then that's when you get really creative and become, it's hard to say you're original. Everyone's influenced by something, and it's hard to you invent dishes. There's a saying it's, everything's been done before. I don't totally believe that, but a lot has been done before. So
well, I would say just for the listeners who don't not so in tune with this, we used to say in my world anyway, so for one Michelin star, you're a great chef. But to get two, you have to do something unique that sets you apart. It's not,
right.
you don't get the second one unless you come up with a concept that's some distinction of cooking techniques, new flavor, new inspirations
That's
that you achieve
yours.
that. So,
Yeah, that's yours. And then the third star would come with is consistency, right? Stay there at every, and that's kind of like,
well,
you know,
I don't know. We used to say it's the golden toilet seats, but I'm not sure.
um, but it's the same at home. I I don't try to impress people at home. I don't try. I say that, and I'm not even impressing people at the. I want to do great food, right? So for me, I in my cookbook, I should have tagged it, but for me, it's about spending when I'm cooking for friends and family. It's about not impressing. It's about cooking really good food, seasonal food that's cooked properly, seasoned properly, because seasoning is real important. And then I used to spend too much time in the kitchen and prepping, and then not enough time with my guests. So it's about working smarter, not harder, cooking seasonally, going to the market, just preparing really good food so you can sit down at the table and enjoy your friends and family and not be in the kitchen slaving away.
I think this is at the very core of our conversation here, right? This is
Yeah.
at the very heart of conversation because I mean I catered a lot and so on, and people will always ask me like, "Well, how do you do it?" And the word is, of course, mise en place, and you so great explain that in your site, by the way. So,
Yeah.
guys, if you haven't been yet on his site, please go and check it out. This is really geared
Chef
towards the
Tarrance Brennan. Shout out to me.
This is really geared towards the home chef, right? So
Yes.
although your Michelin star background, but you're dealing with real issues to what the experience you have had from your Michelin star role,
Right.
and now you're bringing this home to our home cooking philosophy. And I think there you wrapped it so nicely up to say, how can you do it? How can you set it up
Right.
so you can enjoy your guests?
Right.
That is the key, right? That's
Right.
something very important.
So I'm launching a cooking show on YouTube. I think this weekend or definitely by next weekend, and it's me in my kitchen, but it's mostly about how is helping people cook at home easier, have fun, cook great food, showing them it doesn't have to be difficult, even though you're Michelin starred chef. And then every once in a while, I do something that that's Michelin worthy or a plated that's Michelin starred worthy. But a lot of that times, it's a simple presentation in most Michelin starred restaurants. I mean, some have 20 ingredients on a plate, but kind of if you overall Michelin star cooking, at least the presentations, there's a lot that goes into it, a lot goes behind it, but the presentation's pretty simple. 3 or 4 ingredients on the plate. You don't have to have 20 or 30. So in my cooking show, I really, it's not about me. As a matter of fact, my intro, I just finished the intro. It's about you, the viewer, and I want to help you learn technique, learn how to cook with ease, have fun along the way, and get you in the kitchen and cook. Because for me, there's no better antidote than in these troubled times than spending time at the table with friends and family over good food. I mean, there's nothing. It's very for me either at home or in a restaurant. There's not too many better things than doing that.
So I gotta ask you, first off, where can we find you cook then? Is that gonna be on Substack or where is it gonna be?
Well, both. I'm launching the Chef Tarrance Brennan YouTube channel. I just put up the intro, but I'm going to start posting videos. It's not there yet, but the channel's done. So Chef Tarrance. So, make a long story short, I used to be on Instagram during COVID, and I was Terrance Brennan everywhere. Then I got hacked, and Terrance Brennan, I couldn't get it back. So then I rebranded rebranded. Now I'm Chef Terrance Brennan everywhere. So I've been doing that the last 8 months, kind of. My YouTube is Chef Tarrance Brennan, my Instagram is Chef Tarrance Brennan, but I haven't been posting a lot. Now I'm going to start posting a lot. So it's everywhere at Chef Tarrance Brennan, whether it's Instagram, it's at Chef Tarrance Brennan, YouTube at Chef Tarrance Brennan, Facebook at Chef Tarrance Brennan.
But you're going by TB on Substack. Is that gonna be
Yeah, so the newsletter is called TB Home Kitchen because I have another website. I have my professional website, Terrance Brennan, where all my restaurant and professional. And then I have a home, TB Home Kitchen. It's called. So that's where it's for the home kitchen, and that's how the newsletter developed out of that being called TB Home Kitchen.
so can you maybe explain what people can then expect? Like if you're gonna do what's your plan? Like what would be a dish? You're not gonna cook fresh tagliatelle or I mean what's your premise
No,
for the home cook where you say, okay, well that's a good dish to show
yeah,
somebody.
well, I I will make fresh pasta. I mean, I love pasta. I cook a lot of dried pasta at home. Depending on my mood, whether I like fresh or dried better, but I like dried a lot. Um, but sometimes I'll video what I'm cooking for the family. Yeah, I cook a lot for my girlfriend Jody. Her parents live 3 houses down, and her son's around. So usually on the weekend, I'm cooking for 8 to 10 people. So a lot of that cooking. But then there's more specific things. I really want to get into teaching more
Aren't
so
you
than
supposed
here's
to
what
be
I made
retired,
for.
chef? Chef, aren't you supposed to be retired by now? Why cook for 10
I
people?
wish. I wish I was retired like you. No, I gotta. Yeah, and I have a real job. I have other stuff I do. So, but I still love it. I still enjoy cooking. I mean, that's why we do it, right? I'm very passionate about cooking. I still love what I do and the whole process and stuff. But now I
So,
want to
so
share that with the
you
home cook.
show people how you would cook for 10 people, for your family and for your friends. You would
Right,
actually show that live or what's that?
right. So last night I just cooked for 12 people. Uh, and listen, I don't try and do restaurant plated food. It's better at home to do platters or I did plate the food last night because what I did was they were Italian and they wanted Sunday sauce. So I braised pork and short ribs in a tomato sauce and made a pasta and did a what was my appetizer? What did I start with? Oh gosh. Anyway, so it's usually I always like to incorporate greens or a salad in a meal. Just if I'm not, I don't want to spend all day in the kitchen because I work during the week. I want to come home. I don't want to spend all day in the kitchen to try and impress people at night. I want to do really good, fresh food that tastes well, that's well executed, that's done correctly, that's seasoned properly, and you know,
So I really love what you just mentioned there, and I want the listeners to maybe like catch up with that a little bit. You mentioned briefly that normally you use platters. I think if I'm a home cook and I don't do much cooking, right? So if I'm a rookie cook, how would a Michelin star chef at home create platters? How keep everything warm, right? When I watch home cooks, typically, the last 30 minutes is a freak show. Everybody freaking out, right? But what advice would you give somebody, a home cook, to say, hey, set this up, have this ready, have that ready, and then focus on the fresh ingredients, or what's your philosophy?
that's right. So depending on the recipe, right? So you want to do as much as possible ahead of time, right? And then you reserve the last a la minute, meaning last minute cooking. So you can focus on if you're cooking fish, for example, if it's a fish dish you want to cook or scallops you want to cook at the last minute, not an hour or two in advance, like the Sunday sauce. I started at 9 in the morning, so it was all done. I set it aside, and all I had to do was cook the pasta and do the salad, right? So as much as you can, sauces, dressings, mise en place, cutting things ahead of time, and then only if it's going to affect the quality would I not maybe cook something in advance. Obviously, a piece of fish, if it's a cooked roasted piece of fish with olives and tomatoes and in the oven, you could do that a little bit advance and flash it. But I like to cook fish kind of a la minute, but have everything ready. So everything's ready while it's cooking. I'm plating. Getting back to the platters, actually platters, the food stays warmer in platters because of the volume, right? So sometimes if I end up having said all that, I end up plating a lot. but but platter wise, like with Thanksgiving when there's a lot of people, I'm not going to slice a turkey, fan the turkey, so platters and then have it on a big table. And I don't put it on the table where you have to pass these heavy platters around to everybody. I set it up in the kitchen on a long table where people come like a buffet and they'll come and take their own food out of the platter. Because I just find that when you bring platters to the table, it's very cumbersome for guests. And it's a lot of, especially 10, 12 people. It's the time that, the platter of turkey gets to the last guest. It's not ideal. But
It's hard. So would you advise for people to put the platters into the oven, or put
oh,
the oven
absolutely.
in
Yeah.
low
Yeah,
setting, or how
you
do
wanna
you?
warm the platters up so they're not ice cold, but a lot of times, listen, I like to work smarter, not harder, and you gotta weigh, like, the payoff, right? If I have 1 oven, so it's not like I have 2 ovens, so I actually use the microwave a lot to reheat. So, for example, purees or I blanch, say, some green beans, I'll blanch them ahead of time for the seasoning of butter and keep it cold, and then while I'm doing other stuff, I'll start microwaving in batches. So
So
I'll
per,
warm it up in microwaves. So that
so per,
especially at Thanksgiving, puree of sweet potato. I'm not trying to have five. I cook with too many pots anyway, but I'm not trying to have 5 pots on the stove, stirring it slowly and heating things up slowly. I do some things, but I'll use the microwave when I can.
for my viewers, a lot of them are like ultra healthy and so on, right? Or some, when people deal with cancer or something, do your own thing, of course, right? But I have read so many studies, right? So I'm going through How Not to Die. You read study conclusions from Dr. McGregor, right?
Uh-huh.
You cannot find any literature where it says microwaving is unhealthy for you. There is nothing there. I've
That's
looked at
correct. That's correct. And that's out there as people think, oh, the way microwave waves are unhealthy, cancer. Well, it doesn't leak. If you have an old if it's crashed, something's wrong with it, yeah. But there's no proof for that. So I have no problem with using microwaves. Some
and,
chefs are like, I'll
and
never use a microwave.
I do the
Why?
same. I
Yeah.
do the same exactly. And what you really, I think, so nail here is for the home cook. this makes the difference between stress-free and the
Yeah,
freak show.
yeah. So sometimes I have it's like a airplane runway, ready to take. I'll have like things lined up, ready to go in the microwave. Because actually, I should have 2 or 3 microwaves. I should have a bank of microwaves, but I have one. So as you know, say some potato puree, you gotta if it's cold, you heat it up, take it out, move it around, heat it up, move it. It's not just like put it and forget about it. So it does take a little bit of effort, but I use the microwave quite a bit.
So here is the other thing that you mentioned early on, actually, when we started talking about this, which I think is a key that the home cooks don't do, right? So, like whenever, if you're already experienced enough and you cook a fish and you make a fresh sauce, I'm all 100% for it, right? But there is this option to just make that sauce in advance. And then if you still want to have that fumet, you can include it or not. But you have the pastas, you have the caponatas, you have so many options. You make like a nice little olive
Yeah,
tapenade or whatever
yeah,
you want.
right.
But make it in advance, and that really, really just elevates. It gets you stress-free cooking again, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you have so many options to deal with the flavor upfront, taste it properly, right?
Right,
As opposed
right,
to last minute stress, you already
right.
have the perfect sauce. Okay. And
Yeah,
then you finish it off, right? So
yeah.
you have maybe some examples where you would say, well, this or that is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
good.
so condiments are key, right? So, like you mentioned a tapenade, you could have that a tapenade will last in the fridge for weeks, right? A tapenade months. A tapenade for those who don't know what tapenade is, it's a an olive condiment with has shallots, capers, olives, garlic, olive oil, and it's used in Provençal and Mediterranean cooking a lot. Aioli, I'll have aioli and I'll just whisk that up with I'll put a, you know, yeah, a little hot sauce in it, mix it up, and I have something for a piece of fish. Asian sauces are easy to do. They're like, most of the stuff comes out of the bottle anyway. I just made miso soup, which is, it's basically bonito flakes. It's such an easy soup to make. You
Yeah.
make it in after you infuse it with the seaweed, for 10, 15 minutes. Then it's just you strain it out after a couple minutes and you have miso soup and whisking miso. So things like that. There's a lot of things that you don't have to labor over, but even stocks though, Martin, I just haven't found a good stock you can buy. And I'd rather use water, I just haven't found, but what I've been doing for a long time, especially at home, I'm making stocks in a pressure cooker where, you just throw it in there, and in 45 minutes, you have a beautiful stock. So I do things like that. You can freeze them in ice cubes and, but make it in bulk. I also do a lot of things in bulk and then freeze it. Like if I do a soup, I'll make a big batch cooking, as doing the volume that you've done in the past, and then I'll freeze the soup. And most of the time, you will not. I beg you to differ if you know that soup was frozen. Butternut squash soup. Make a big batch. We serve it that night. I put 2 quarts in the freezer, and I'm ready to go. Anytime I need something, I'll defrost it. I have the miso soup in the freezer, and you heat. Would I do that in my restaurant? No. Would I do it at home? Absolutely.
And that's,
Bolognese
I
sauce. I'll
still,
freeze it. Yeah.
I so appreciate you saying this, right? Coming from a Michelin star chef, home cooking, I think we have moved too far away. Everybody sees the tweezers and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff in the food
Yeah.
cooking show. And they're like, look, no, 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 no. You just focus on the real, wholesome, fresh food.
Yes. Yes.
Cook, freeze some stuff up. I used to cater big, big events, as you mentioned there. And what I did actually, what I think is a big help for us, was a big help is we froze dessert. So you can freeze brownies, you can
Oh,
freeze what's the
pastry.
cookies,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have a pastry background. I just opened a pastry shop. Pastries freeze very well. Most pastries freeze very well.
freeze. Yeah.
We could do a lot of croissants and stuff here. We make a big batch, freeze them. Another thing I
And
do,
then
for example, oatmeal.
the other
Oatmeal, for
thing
example.
too is with the cookies that I just quickly wanted to mention.
Yeah.
People couldn't believe it, right? So we did 34,000 plates in 3 days at the end of my
Wow.
career. Maybe I
Wow.
did it over 20 years worked up to it. But anyhow,
Yeah.
we cooked, we baked the cookies fresh. And people couldn't believe that for a massive catering like this, we baked fresh cookies.
Yeah. Yeah.
They looked at us in the oven, right? It's not like, the owners that I thought like we're crazy to even try this, but I'm like, well, it's just as fast cooking it fresh as if I cook it in the morning, right? Because if it's
Right,
frozen,
right.
I cut them up and then I bake them fresh, right? If a home cooks, right? So you put out your buffet for your friends and family and everything. And at that stage, when you go and you sit down, you put in the cookies in the oven.
Yeah,
Guess what's going to
absolutely.
happen?
Yeah.
You take them out fresh. It smells. Everybody smells them. Everybody's like,
Yeah, yeah,
"Oh, the
yeah,
best this I've
yeah,
ever had."
yeah. Well, that's getting back to mise en place, everything in its place. You do as much as possible so the last minute cooking is not so labor intensive and you can execute correctly with something that needs more of your attention at the last minute. Another thing I want to mention about something I freeze is my go-to breakfast slash early lunch because I intermittent fast to about my first meal is about 11 o'clock, and most of the time, 5 days a week, unless I feel like eggs or something, I'll eat oatmeal, but I use steel cut oats. I don't want to stand 30 minutes, 25, 20 minutes over the stove cooking steel cut. So I big batch it. I throw blueberries in there, any other type of antibiotic stuff. Finish it with that, and then I individually portion it and I freeze it. So
Wow.
what
I
I'll
don't
do
know
is
that. That's
if I
so good.
know I'll take a few out, 3 out and let them defrost over the day or 2. I'll take it, put it in a bowl, microwave it for 30 seconds, throw some nuts on it, yogurt, fruit. I have something to eat literally in 2 minutes.
That is so awesome.
And that's my go-to breakfast. It's healthy, it's easy, it's quick, and so I think a lot like that.
You can even have that on the run. Like if
Yeah,
you're busy,
yeah.
you can just bring it with you in the car or whatever.
Yeah. So Martin, how do you cook at home? What do you do? You have, you cook healthy cuisine, medicinal cuisine, I guess, and how did you get involved in that, and what is your processes?
So I have shifted so much over the course of my career, right? Because I started German and then I was in New York for a while, cooking for a big German restaurant, and then San Francisco working in Puck. But what inspired me then, what actually happened is my father-in-law had a heart attack, a massive heart attack. And he went on the Dr. Dean Ornish diet, right? So that's a very strict, no fat diet. This is like after heart attack. Okay, this is very serious stuff.
Yeah, what was the doctor? You
Medication,
mentioned the doctor. I think I have his book too. What is it?
Dr. Dean Ornish
Oh,
spectrum.
okay. There's another doctor that no oil, no nuts, right?
Yeah, no, this is Dr. Cargill Esselstyn. Maybe you're talking about.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, so I have a recipe in his cookbook.
Oh, okay. Oh, really?
You're gonna find my name in his cookbook.
Oh, okay, great, good. I'll look for it.
And I have this book right here somewhere too. Doesn't really matter. But here's a funny fact: his wife Annie Esselstyn just broke the world record for the longest weight hanging for I think 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes. She did. 90 years old, and she's free hanging there at 90 years old for 3 minutes. World record.
Oh, Scott Bass just joined, my good friend Scott Bass. Scott, thanks for joining.
So
Um,
I think that to me, so actually my mother-in-law actually contacted Cargill Leslie as well. And so they kept very strict with it. Back then, Bill Clinton was one of his patients as well, right?
mhm.
So this is a very extreme thing, but I think we all learn from the extremes. We should treat culinary medicine just like sport, just like Michelin star operations. Full on who has the best ingredients to lower cholesterol, LDL more than the next guy, inflammation down. What can you do with foods? And there's very specific foods, and I got very fascinated with it. I typically allow doctors to guide me. So typically it's like a doctor will tell me, hey, Martin, cook A, B, C, D. And then I write recipes, right? So with Dr. Joel Fuhrman, he's really popular, sold 3 million books. But I did a lot of events with him, and he's a very easy formulates this idea of most nutrients per calorie equals health.
Yeah.
So there you just look at where is the most nutrition, and you the biggest diversity too, right? So not necessarily vegan. So that's not how this works.
Do
Blue
you
zones
did
are
you
not
do you
vegan.
do you get the New York Times at all? I mean, there's just recently, I think yesterday, I didn't read it yet, but they have an article of can food be medicine? And it speaks to you. So
I
look it
have
up
to.
either yesterday or 2 days ago. I haven't read it yet, but the New York Times just did an article about can food be
I would
medicine?
love to read it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I'm involved in Austria now. So I have several professors and the leading people here who train doctors. I'm in contact with them. So
Oh,
I'm in contact with the people who educate the doctors on nutrition.
oh, wow. Great.
Yeah. And so with we'll see if we get there, but the idea is that I may do cooking demonstration for doctors, which I've done anyways. I've done it for cardiologists because the cardiologist asking me, "Hi, Martin, can you kind of show us the difference between Dr. Dinornish and Dr. Esselstyn? They have little
Yeah.
differences, right?"
Yeah.
And so I have to go precisely of what they're saying, the ingredients. It's not what I do. Nobody cares what the cook does, right?
Right.
This is precisely how it works, right? Ornish does, there may be egg whites in there, that kind of stuff. So I don't want to go into depth of that, but to me, that's my new world. I have for so many years enjoyed eating foie gras, eating all the things, drinking all the wrong things, and so for me personally, it's good. And I was overweight really bad. I had 100. Well, I don't even know in pounds in 230 pounds, but I had like pre-diabetes maybe. So that went away right away. And
Uh-huh.
then I went into a hospital and did medical trials. I cooked for medical trial and we lowered cholesterol 80 points in 30 days. So
Wow.
this, yeah. And so I took
Okay.
lunch and dinner, like full on. Okay. But there were other people with hypertension, pre-diabetes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then I did another group, but always with doctors. Don't do this at home. Always with medication, always, So this is the inspiration, and what you see on my website is basically the results of that. And I eat this way, right? So I do nut butters, I do walnut butter, I do cashew butter. Cashew butter is just as good as any butter, actually. Turns out, right?
Yeah.
It's very good, very delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can make any flavor with cashew butter that you want, right? So you can add your orange in there, you can whatever flavor. So
Talk about there's a lot of misinformation about oils, right? What about oils? Canola oil, but if it's exfoliator pressed, that's okay or not. What is your go-to oils and what do you avoid?
yeah, it's a sensitive topic, right? So you always have everything is individualized, right? So I'm dealing with people with severe arteriosclerosis, right? Where the arteries are clogged 80, 70 or something.
Yeah.
40% of Americans are obese, 80% of Americans are overweight. In Austria, it's 60% of people are overweight, right? So
Really? I don't
basically,
know.
yeah, and it's quite like as long as you're active and various things, that's okay. So it's not just a weight issue. My parents are overweight; they're doing fine, 85 years old. But it's a layers, right? So if you're super healthy, you sleep, you have less stress and all that, then it can get away with more.
Right.
But if you're not, and you already have deposit in the arteries,
Yeah, the
well, then
calcium builds up, right? Yeah.
right. So it's very individualized. So when you talk about oil, you have to consider that because one tablespoon oil has 120 calories.
Right.
So if you're trying to lose weight, it's really hard to do it because you can pour in 300, 500 calories. I always tell my viewers, I'm like, look, when you use oil, first thing you do is you count the calories. A tablespoon has 120 calories. If you're putting in a aioli, 3 tablespoons in, and you're eating that, that's 360 calories. It doesn't matter if it's olive oil, if it's whatever it is, right? So I think make it dose dependent, or you have to be careful dose dependent. Make it calorie dependent. How about that? Right.
Okay. Because
So
I've read some studies where, 2 tablespoons of olive oil helps with inflammation, the health benefits. But you're right. Then what's the trade off? You're going to have more calories. You may not lose weight as that you need to lose or gain weight, but you know,
no, so I can give along. So the people I listen to, they would maybe say 1.5 tablespoons in
yeah,
general, board of terms. If your brain health for these kind of things, but in Japan, there's 124 million people who have life expectancy to 85, and they don't have any olive oil.
right.
So where do they get their brain health from, right? So it's a little tricky. So they have it, of course, then from algae and all this other stuff, right? So the fat in all these products.
Yeah.
So it's layers here and there, and we have to look at in each individual case. I'm not the doc. I try to play doctor. I
Yeah.
just try to make people aware of if you try to lose weight, well, measure the calories. That's it.
Right. So when your website and way you cook at home, it's nutrient dense, not necessarily diet food. It's just nutrient tasty food. Is that what you how you cook?
That's well, yeah, that's a good sort of description,
Mm.
but it's very much culinary medicine. So the idea is I bring the culinary part on one side, and the medicine comes typically from a doctor or a study or something like
Gotcha.
that. And
Yeah.
I try to steal your recipes, and then I try to bring it to the
Yeah, yeah.
well, it's actually true, right? So I always try to look up the newest in food trends, historic foods, or like you would be a big inspiration on the Roger Verger side of this
Yeah.
Mediterranean cooking. And
Right.
as we said before, people live very 89-year life expectancy in Monaco. This is the best in the Mediterranean.
Mm.
And your style of cooking, Roger Verger's style of cooking, allows you that success. So
Right.
you don't have to be perfect to get them, right?
Right. Isn't there like not Corsica? Isn't there another island that has a very that's way up there as well? And it's
So,
in the blue
so,
zone.
so there's
Yeah.
a couple different things to look at it. So you have the blue zones, and you have a very limited amount of people on the blue zones. There's very little.
Right.
There's like so many hundreds.
Seven regions or seven
Yeah.
places. Yeah.
Well, there's four for the blue zones, but within the blue zones, they added the Adventist group in California, which is
Yeah.
not an Norwegian group, right? So, but
Right.
anyhow,
Right.
so then it's Costa Rica and Sardinia and
Right. Sardinia. Right.
Greece, of course, and so on. But that is a very small, comparatively small group. In Monaco, you have 38,000 people that live 89 years life expectancy.
Yeah. Okay.
Then in Hong Kong, you have, I don't know how many millions. And then in Japan, you have 124 million. And they have the least amount of obesity rate. The obesity rate is only 5%.
Yeah.
And one of the lowest heart cardiovascular disease, right? It's cleared by 100,000. So when you look at, stroke and all this kind of stuff, I'm a cook, but I love looking at it. And I'm like, well, okay, there's something there that they do right. And what
Yeah.
they do right is you, for example, when I may say so, you were trained classic, you're using olive oil Roger Verger style in very limited small amounts. You serve cheese with small amounts. And you get away with that, right? Because there's not so many obesity people in France necessarily, right? If you follow that Mediterranean style of cooking. But what we have done is we have taken all this good stuff that we enjoy so much and we have loaded more and more and more and more on, right?
Yeah. Portion. Yeah. Larger
So
portion.
you
Yeah.
could say the Western cuisine, we are layering calories, right? So you're putting in 200 calories of oil, 100 calories in the sauce, and 200 calories of cheese over it, right? And in Japan, you're using water 0 calories. Kanbu use bonito flakes, so we're layering
Yep.
umami, no calories, and then you
Right.
finish it off with spices and maybe a little miso, and then maybe you drizzle a little oil at the end, a little sesame oil or something. But no calories in Japanese cuisine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dish after dish after dish. If you look at hundreds of recipes, it's always the same thing. Everybody thinks, oh, it's sushi, and no, well, Japanese people don't really eat sushi. They eat 12%, 15% sushi, maybe,
Yeah.
uh, and 55% carbohydrates and 26% fats, right? So anyhow, that's where I'm sort of going because I think if you want to lose or control weight, Japanese just cooking techniques are great, or the small portions that I could do in
Yeah.
Mediterranean with
Yeah.
a very beautiful, fresh,
Yeah.
unadulterated foods like you have learned actually so long.
Yeah. 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 Great. Well.
That's in short. But no, I so enjoyed. We're at the hour mark. I would
Yeah.
love to continue another talk
Sure.
about this. And sorry if
Sure.
I've gone too long on health, but it's supposed to be
Well,
showcasing
it's
health cooking.
it's your show. It's your show. No, but
You
health
know,
is important. I mean, listen, I think about health a lot. You reach a certain age, it's like, you know, health is like everything, right? I mean, that old adage, like if you don't have your health, you have nothing. I mean, really, it's like we've been through life, good times, bad times. It's all you really come to understand there's nothing more important than your health because you can't really do anything else without the health. So it's important. And I listen. I've uh, I've had some knee injuries and stuff, so I've not been working out as much as I like to, but uh, I still indulge in probably a little too much. But I do love. I do think about health a lot, and when I'm cooking, and you know, uh, certainly always use fresh ingredients and cut back on all the bad fats as much as I can. But every so often, I
Well, I
think
think,
everything.
yeah,
Um,
I think you're such an inspiration by actually showing home cooks how to help themselves better. The article on the tomatoes and, just this whole idea of, hey, let's step back a little bit. Let's forget the tweezers and the squeeze balls and all that kind of stuff. Let's just do real cooking, like the wild foods you're talking about. I mean, if
yeah,
you have eaten wild, if you really enjoy meat, eat the wild foods, right?
yeah,
That's the way to
absolutely.
do it, right?
Yeah, grass-fed
And
beef and local, and yeah. So another thing I do, Martin, is whenever I can make a dish vegetarian without affecting what the the concept is, like a lot of soups, for example, I'll use whether it's especially soups like Kai flour, butternut squash that are not really they're very delicate in flavor. I won't when I make a vichyssoise, a classic vichyssoise recipe has chicken stock. I don't use chicken stock because number one, I want it to taste potato and leek. I don't need the chicken flavor in there. Two, the consistency when it's cold, it kind of gels a little bit. It gets a little funny texture to it. So I'm gonna post a vichyssoise soup, but I'll put some potato chips and caviar on it, so it's not totally healthy, but but you could stop at just a base soup and there's very just also when you add cream to something, for example, like many recipes add too much cream. When you say tomato soup, I'm posting a canned tomato soup recipe. It's supposed to be winter canned tomato soup, but I'm just getting to posting it, but I'm still going to post it. But when I add cream to a soup, if you think about adding cream to something, cream sauce, cream soup, what does that do? It dilutes whatever flavor you're trying to achieve, right? So if you're making a tomato soup, you add cream, for me, it's about adding a texture to it. Like add cream. So you don't, if it says a cup of cream in the recipe, you can get away with a quarter cup and still have that voluptuous, that feel, your mouth feel. But what also with this recipe I did, instead of no cream, I emulsified it with olive oil to get that kind of mouth feel in your mouth and no cream at all. But so when I can cook vegetarian and not add a chicken stock or a beef stock, I do that, especially with soups. And then, because in the restaurants, a lot of people are vegetarian and they don't want to eat beef and this and that. So when you're in a busy restaurant, you want to be able to grab things from your tool shed, from your toolbox, and be able to not have to change it all at once and be able to offer great food. And I keep a lot of things vegetarian when I can, but you would never know it was vegetarian.
because you're cooking it mild on the one side, but then you still strengthen it and you lay the flavor. So it's
Right. Well,
very,
it's
very
it's
good.
about whatever the main ingredient is, right? That's what you
Yeah.
want to shine. You want to let the shine coming through, and a stock is has its place in red wine sauce or an onion soup. You need stock. Well, I mean, you can still make it with water and maybe a little miso or something.
So I really have to back a little bit off. It's just super quick because I know we all need to move on. But the
Yeah.
the vichyssoise actually has resistant starch, right? So when you chill a potato, resistant starch is one of the key elements to prevent, to like colon or health. I should just say, I want to be very careful, but resistant starch, something we shouldn't forget. And you do it by chilling potatoes or rice or something like that. Vichyssoise is the classic example, right? We in Austria, we have actually potato salad that we're chilling off. And so, of course, look, if you have diabetes or something, you have to watch out, right? But if you're standard always eating healthy and everything, a vichyssoise is actually a very, very healthy way to eat with a very specific nutrient, and it's a classic dish, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, after speaking to you, I'm gonna look at my recipes from a little different lens and try to understand the health benefits more so.
Well, and I'm gonna go more your way and actually figure out how you do the bladders there, you know. So there's lots to be learned there. You know? I really, really enjoyed having you on here. You know, we can switch it up, we can do it again.
Yeah, yeah,
I think this would be great for home viewers to actually have an inside scoop into
yeah.
level cooking.
All right, great. Well, it was a pleasure. We've been going back and forth with chats, but it was a pleasure meeting you here. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I hope
Okay.
you have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, you too,
Enjoy
man.
yourself.
All right.
Thank you,
Cheers.
everybody,
Bye
for
bye.
watching.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.